Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We are taking a truly fascinating look at the very nature of human thought in the digital age. Specifically, we're going to dissect the boundary between artificial pattern recognition and true human understanding. And to pull this off, we're going back to a classic, foundational framework that educators have literally relied on for decades. We're going to see exactly how human conceptual understanding stacks up against what AI is actually doing behind the scenes, and how the entire concept of learning itself is being totally redefined.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's a question we've all probably asked ourselves lately, right? You ask an AI a highly complex question, or you tell it to write a piece of intricate code, or even have it take a rigorous standardized exam, and boom, it passes with flying colors. I mean, it creates this stunning illusion of competence. It looks, sounds, and reads exactly like human intelligence. But here's the catch. When that machine spits out the perfectly formatted, 100% correct answer, does it possess any actual comprehension of the concepts it just explained to you? Well, to figure that out, we need a reliable way to measure understanding.
So to see where AI really stands, we are turning to Bloom's taxonomy. Originally developed way back in 1956 and then famously revised in 2001, this taxonomy is basically a ladder of cognitive skills. It starts down at the foundational level of simple memorization and remembering, and then moves up through understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, all the way up to the absolute peak of human cognition, creating. It's been our gold standard benchmark. But what happens when an algorithm can suddenly bypass those lower steps entirely and perfectly mimic the top ones?
Well, generative AI really exposes the wizard behind the curtain here. It's crucial to understand that it is not thinking, it's calculating. When it generates an output, all it's doing is identifying statistical patterns in its massive training data. It's literally just predicting the most mathematically probable next word or pixel. It doesn't rely on conceptual criteria, and it certainly doesn't grasp the underlying abstract meaning of the text. It's essentially executing a highly sophisticated form of autocomplete, and that is fundamentally different from a human mind actively making sense of distinct pieces of knowledge.
Let's start at the very bottom of Bloom's ladder, remembering. Now, AI possesses a vast, seemingly infinite capacity for data recall, but it has a massive fatal flaw. It's limited entirely by its training data and is famously prone to hallucinations, right? Where it just confidently fabricates totally fake information. Humans, on the other hand, well, we might not be able to memorize the entire internet, but we possess foundational knowledge. And we absolutely still need that internal baseline of basic facts. Why? Because without our own internal knowledge base, we simply wouldn't be able to fact-check the machine or recognize when it's completely going off the rails. I like to think of AI as a cognitive crutch. It can absolutely help you walk. It'll speed up your ability to retrieve facts, summarize huge documents, and sequence events in seconds. But it cannot replace your legs. It just can't carry the heavy weight of higher-order understanding. If you don't internalize basic concepts and definitions yourself, it becomes entirely impractical to engage in complex, higher-order tasks in literally any discipline. At the end of the day, you have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
And that brings us to the next level up, understanding. Here is where the divide really sharply comes into focus. AI relies entirely on pattern recognition. Sure, it can summarize and translate beautifully based on those mathematical patterns, but human conceptual understanding, it is vastly richer. We have the unique ability to contextualize what we know. We attach emotional depth and lived, real-world experience to information. We can read between the lines. An AI might know the dictionary definition of every single word in a story, but only a human can truly feel and understand the underlying tragic or joyful meaning of that narrative. There's this really powerful quote from educational experts Wiggins and McTee that perfectly captures the essence of this difference. They say, "Understanding is a mental construct, an abstraction made by the human mind to make sense of many distinct pieces of knowledge. True meaning-making requires personal reflection. Understanding isn't just about outputting the right sequence of facts, it's an active abstraction built by a lived human mind. A machine cannot reflect. It can't draw upon personal experience, values, or empathy, simply because it doesn't have any of those things."
Let's move to and see how this builds as we go further up the taxonomy to applying and analyzing. AI is undeniably a powerhouse here, as long as the rules are clear. It can analyze massive data sets in milliseconds and perfectly apply trained procedures to new data. But it hits an absolute brick wall when faced with the unfamiliar. It relies on predictability. Humans, however, are brilliantly adept at handling the novel.
We make intuitive leaps. We recognize when a standard method just isn't working for a unique problem, and we creatively pivot. AI just breaks down when a problem falls outside its specific training parameters.
As we reach evaluating, you'll notice the gap widens even further. AI can mimic an authoritative tone flawlessly, generating text that sounds like a definitive, well-thought-out judgment. But it's an empty mimicry. It cannot actually interpret value. Human evaluation is this deeply complex process that uniquely combines context, practical reality, and affective value to critique authentic, real-world problems. We evaluate based on what makes sense in a human society, things a statistical, math-based model simply can't compute.
Finally, we reach the very top of the traditional taxonomy, creating. Now, AI can rapidly generate a dizzying array of options by mashing up vast components from its data. But because it doesn't actually understand what it's creating, it makes completely bizarre errors, like generating images of people with 7 fingers on one hand. It mistakes the essential patterns of reality. Human creativity, however, is driven by intention and what we call embodied cognition. Our intelligence is literally rooted in our physical experiences and interactions with the real world. When we create, we're repurposing our lived knowledge with a specific, deeply meaningful goal in mind.
So because generative AI has totally disrupted this traditional step-by-step hierarchy, experts are now completely reconceptualizing Bloom's taxonomy. The old linear verbs, first you remember, then you understand, then you apply, they are honestly just too simplistic for today's complex AI-human interactions. Learning is no longer just a vertical progression up a ladder. It's becoming a dynamic, interconnected loop between the human and the machine.
And this brilliantly illustrates the proposed new framework for our era. Cognitive skills are now viewed more as interconnected nodes forming an intelligence augmentation partnership, or IA. AI has a very specific role, and the human has a specific role. AI retrieves, generates, and describes. The human judges, augments, contextualizes, and evaluates. It's a fundamental shift from solitary human cognition to a shared co-piloted learning experience. Let's break down a couple of these new terms.
One of the most fascinating new categories proposed here is called ventriloquizing. This is basically a brand new foundational level. It's what happens when you use an AI to retrieve information, and then you essentially replicate or copy-paste that memory right onto your task. It acts as an artificial augmentation of human recall. But it forces us to ask a really tough question. What truly constitutes learning in the digital age when basic informational retrieval is fully automated for us? If the machine does all the remembering, what cognitive work is actually left for the student? And that brings us to how the very top of the pyramid has evolved, shifting from creating to co-curating. Think about using an image generator like DALL-E. The AI rapidly curates visual options for you. But the creation process doesn't end there, does it? That's just the raw material. The human absolutely must step in to evaluate the output, augment it with their own distinct creativity, tweak the prompts, and apply critical judgment to produce a meaningful final piece. It emphasizes the indispensable, irreplaceable need for human judgment to refine machine generation.
Now, it's worth noting that while AI lacks human understanding, it is incredibly powerful at analyzing structural patterns, even within education itself. Research actually shows that finely tuned AI models can map educational text and exam questions to their corresponding Bloom's taxonomy levels with an impressive 82.3% accuracy. I mean, that's wild! It proves that AI can act as a highly structured pedagogical design assistant. It's not just a fancy paraphraser, it can actively help educators align their teaching materials with specific cognitive outcomes. So the crucial point is this. We have a brand new human mandate in learning. AI is fantastic, truly fantastic at handling data processing, recalling facts, and replicating structural forms. But humans must provide the intelligence augmentation. We simply cannot offload the act of meaning-making to an algorithm. Students must independently construct their own theories of meaning based on their unique, lived experiences. And moving forward, the way we assess learning has to capture this entire complex collaborative process, not just the final shiny output that the AI helped generate.
Which leaves us with a final, really important thought to ponder today, as you navigate your own work, your studies, and just life in general. If machines can perfectly mimic the mechanics and the outputs of our thought, what does it truly mean to be uniquely human in your own learning journey? How are you actively building your own conceptual understanding rather than just relying on the artificial patterns of a machine? I want you to think about that the very next time you type a prompt. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.